In Luke chapter 18, Jesus taught a parable about a woman who was a widow, and she came to an unjust judge, appealing to him for justice. Jesus goes on in his parable to say that this unjust judge would not listen to her. He would not answer her petition for a while. So that means that she kept coming to him for quite a long time and not getting any justice. Jesus is giving us an example of how we should persist in prayer. Even though we may not see our prayers answered immediately, there has to be this discipline of persistence. Persist in appealing to God, who, unlike the unjust judge, is just and righteous, and Jesus says he will speedily avenge his own elect. This parable then is really a contrast between an unjust judge who nevertheless answers the petition just because of her persistence. And Jesus contrasts this unjust judge with God, who is the just judge, who will certainly speedily answer our prayers, even though he bears long with us. This means that unlike the unjust judge, God is just and he does care. He is interested in our petitions. But secondly, Jesus goes on to say that even though God is just, he sometimes does bear long with us. Sometimes it takes longer for our prayers to be answered than we would like. And when that happens, we don't really understand why. God, why are you taking so long to answer my prayer? Is it that you don't care? And Jesus here is contrasting the unjust judge by saying, no, God does care. He will speedily avenge his own elect. Then why does God bear long with us? Why does God forbear in immediately answering our petitions for justice? Psalm 73 is a psalm of Asaph, and it gives us a clue as to why God sometimes forbears in immediately answering our petition for justice. Asaph writes, "Truly God is good to Israel." That must be our foundational presumption in praying to God, that God is good. That means God cares. God is just. He's righteous, and when you appeal to God, you are appealing to the righteous judge who is interested and involved, and he hears the prayer of the righteous. Asaph goes on to say that truly God is good to Israel, to such as are pure in heart. That means that when we come before God and we're appealing for justice, we need to first examine our own hearts. Is my heart pure? He says, "As for me, my feet had almost stumbled. My steps had nearly slipped, for I was envious of the boastful when I saw the prosperity of the wicked." And Asaph goes on in this psalm to talk about how when he saw how easy the wicked had it, and they live in luxury, they live in what looks like blessing and prosperity, and they're at ease, and yet there's no righteousness, they're not concerned about living right before God, and yet it looks like they're living the blessed life. And Asaph is saying, this seems so unfair. And it almost caused me to stumble. It almost caused me to just give up and say, well, if God doesn't care, why should I care? But then he goes on to say, in verse 13, "Surely I have cleansed my heart in vain. I've washed my hands in innocence. For all day long I've been plagued and chastened every morning." He says, I'm going through such a hard time. I don't have justice. I'm experiencing an injustice. And it just looks like all my efforts to live right before God are futile and empty and in vain. But he goes on to say in verse 15, "If I had said, I will speak like this, behold, I would have been untrue to the generation of your children. When I thought how to understand this, it was too painful for me. Until I went into the sanctuary of God, then I understood their end." And what this means is we need to understand that it's not over till it's over. In the end, there is a day of judgment when God is going to right every wrong. God is going to make every injustice just, and he's going to set the record straight. There is a day when God is he's going to provide equity for those who have experienced inequity. And so until that day, we must persist in prayer, in being faithful to God, not giving in to that temptation to say, I've cleansed my hands in vain, I'm living the Christian life for nothing, what's the point of all this sanctification? I might as well just live a worldly lifestyle, and just if you can't beat them, join them. And he says, no, that would have been untrue to the generation of the righteous. Instead, I'm going to be faithful, I'm going to stay the course, I'm going to persist in prayer to a God who I know is good, I know is just, and He will answer prayer speedily when the time for that answer comes. So Jesus concludes telling this parable in Luke 18 by saying, I tell you that God will avenge them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will He really find faith on the earth? And so now Jesus turns it around and He says, a person who questions whether God is being faithful, you do wrong to say, is God faithful? On the other hand, when Jesus comes again, at His second coming, will He find faith? Will He find you being faithful? In other words, you and I must stay the course.